I think it's our fourth virtual mentoring session with Virgil. I'm especially happy today. Virgil's joined by a friend and colleague of his, Olivia Singer, who is the fashion news director of British Vogue. And she's here with Virgil to talk a little bit about what it means these days to be newsworthy, which I think is a apt and relevant topic. So Virgil and Olivia, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And I am going to jump in and maybe just ask you both to talk about how you met and have gotten to know one another.
Yeah, well, I'll start. Like it's so crazy. Like before, um, for starters, I want to say thanks for Olivia for joining us. Like she's stepping into sort of like a project that she's might only have seen us like develop in the longer part of the year that's been, but uh, you know, in the industry, this is sort of a lead into the question. In the fashion industry, which kind of has this very big, tall, like almost like scary monolith, there's people within it that you'll meet that you like align with, just like culturally, morally, besides just fashion or besides just looking at clothes or whatever. So I met Olivia. It's like group of friends basically in the bigger tribe of fashion on the global calendar of like, hey, we have to be in Milan this week, or hey, we have to be in Paris. And it's like everyone's got a million appointments. Like some people's paths, a lot of paths will cross, but you'll soon know. So we had just mutual friends. Like I don't even remember the specific day. There's like a why I wanted Olivia to be. You're kind of the first outsider inside my thinking. But why that's the case is because she was in a different tribe of London kids. Like London's like an important place just as much as Paris. There's like a fashion history there. So I don't know, where did I meet you? Like
I know it's the same thing. I don't know, and it's I was trying to think about this yesterday. I really don't know. I remember certain times that you professionally told me things for the first time when I was like, okay, trust me a bit more now. But I don't remember. I mean, there are parts of my life where I feel like I see you more regularly than I see like my sister who lives down the road, because we operate on the same calendar professionally and socially. So
yeah, same.
but yeah, it's through like mutual friends as much as anything else, right?
Yeah, and just why I like is we're not just, you have your own organization that you put together called Rubric, which we're both sort of like sharing energy on each. So we'll get into that later. But I always want to tune the conversation to all of our crew. We're mentoring as we're talking. And so the important thing to remember is like, that's why I wanted Olivia too, is like Vogue with a capital V, like there's only like, she said there's 6 people in her office. It's only like a handful of people. They're very hard to track down. Like you don't just go up, you don't find them on the street. But ultimately they're normal people, and it's like conversation, mutual friends. And all of a sudden Vogue with a capital V is someone approachable. It's something achievable. Peter, what did you call it? Like newsworthy, I thought is a cool
title. Yeah. And maybe just on that topic, Virgil, of it being achievable, Olivia, if I could ask you a little bit more pointedly, just how you got here, a little bit about your career trajectory and how you landed at Vogue, and maybe even a little bit of your day-to-day, just to put some context to this.
So I didn't grow up wanting to work in fashion. That was never my MO. I didn't grow up like thinking about fashion really, or reading fashion magazines. I always felt really like kind of bad that so many fashion journalists have, or fashion designers or whatever, have stories about, being like 12 years old and picking up a copy of Dazed or ID or something. And I didn't. I grew up like interested in music and in politics, in feminist politics. So I did a degree in English literature, and I ended up moving to Paris after my degree, like with the hope of working in feminist activism there, in like critical theory and rape crisis. And I ended up feeling really disillusioned with where the conversation was at. Then it wasn't like the 60s liberalism I was really pinning my hopes on. So after a couple of years spent there, like working whatever jobs, working like in restaurants, and worked in like a kitchen for a year, and all of that sort of stuff, doing fundraising and other projects on the side, I felt like the conversation wasn't engaging enough for people, the conversations around identity and intersectionality, particularly in feminism. This was like 10 years ago or so maybe a bit more. So I came back to London, and I've always had friends who work in or around the fashion industry because I'm from London and I grew up in clubs, going to see bands, going to see music or whatever. And I had a friend who worked with these fashion designers doing projects in feminism. They were a brand called Needham Kirchhoff, and she was a musician as well. And I snuck into a fashion show with her one day because like I had nothing to do. And it felt like all of the things I had been interested in, about feminism, about identity, conversations that I'd found really hard to have with people in an engaging way, had been made material in this like 8-minute experience. And I was like, fuck, I didn't realize that. I don't know, I just hadn't ever really thought about fashion as being a space that could like conjure those emotions so directly. And I bumped into a friend of mine after the show, like when we were all leaving, who was a girl who I'd gone to clubs with through my teen years. And she's Isabella Burley, who was then the fashion features editor at Days magazine. And I'd always written like politics stuff for like, I don't know, blogs or feminist journals or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I love the show. Like, blah, blah. And she said, okay, well, you're so enthusiastic, why don't you write something for us? And I wrote something for Dazed, about like the feminism of this show or something. And suddenly I realized that fashion was something that was engaging in that way. And I think that sort of stayed what I'm interested in fashion. On my date, and then I started writing for places. I had no money, like no money. I had like a ton of jobs, right? I mean, I think it's really important to say from the off, fashion journalism is the worst paid part of this industry. There is no money in it. And so I was earning like very, very little, writing for magazines online, writing. I mean, I would email people. I would find the right email addresses and I would email people. And some of the emails I found recently, like in my early years, they're like horribly cringy. But I sent enough of them, I guess, that sometimes people would let me write for them online. And I would earn like £50 a piece or whatever. And I'd do that in my evenings when I got home from work. And I guess I just kept eating. There was like no recipe for it. Like I got this first piece on Dazed, and that was really major for me. And then I emailed people and just kept on trying. And I sort of slowly built like a portfolio, like a very weird portfolio. And then I got offered a job at another magazine, where I started working 3.5 days a week. And again, I think it's really important to be transparent about money. I found my contract recently. I earned £500 a month working 3.5 days a week. That is not enough to pay anything. So I was working the other 3.5 days, doing like whatever other jobs I could find. And things sort of just went from there. And I ended up after a few years becoming fashion features director at another. And then when Edward joined Vogue, when Edward was announced at Vogue, I think because I'd never grown up thinking about fashion, I wasn't like, oh, this is, I'd never thought about working at Vogue. I was like, Vogue to me was a very glossy, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about old Vogue. It wasn't for me for whatever reasons. And but I remember the day I got appointed, Edward got appointed, I was with someone and I was like, fuck, like I want to work at Vogue. I want to work for Edward. And I loved my job at another. I loved it so much. But suddenly I just got this email out of the blue and asking if I would come and meet with him. And I went and I met with him and in this like little hotel room. And I think one of the things that I've learned over my career is that, in those situations where they're like really, they feel like these really pivotal moments, right? They feel like if I don't do this right, if I don't get this moment right, then my life is over. Like then I lose, like it's game over. What I've realized is just that, like I went and I didn't buy a new outfit. Like I didn't pretend, I don't know, I didn't try and work out what he would want from me. I went and I tried to like be my most authentic self, because I was like, if I get any job based on anything other than who I am and what I believe in, I'm not gonna enjoy that job a year down the line or whatever, and B, I'm not gonna be any good at that job. Like, and if I'm not good at my job, and if it's, the things, I just feel like if I turn up and I'm like myself, then if people want me, they want me. And so I did that, and I was very honest about how I felt about the industry, how I felt about magazines. And the next day he called me and he offered me the job. And I've been there with him now for 4 years.
Perfect trajectory story. What I love about, like, because it's like, that's why what mentoring for me really is like dispelling the myths, right? And so people have this thing about like Vogue, like she said, I still do actually, like this big glossy monolith that for whatever it is the monolith that which you need one in every industry, like that's the thing. If it's Time magazine for people, it's, it's every industry has that. And Vogue, of course, is made up by real people that have gone through struggles that can identify. It's not made of robots. And the other sort of like highlight that I'd like for everyone to listen to is when you're building your brand, of course, you're building your design ethos, you're building the look and feel and how to get maybe like an influencer, someone famous to wear it so that you feel like you could sell more. But think about adding a writer to your team. Like just think about like, hey, there's someone who's got to get to contextualize your work. It doesn't have to just be you.
Yeah.
That's the biggest myth that no one told me until later in my career. It's like, there's trusted people that I banter about my collections with, and I get my story right before I have to tell a writer.
Yeah.
And more often than not, the more times you talk through it, the more it makes sense to someone who's like judging your collections or whatever. So think about young people in your atmosphere that might be a writer and be like, hey, help me write the brand manifesto of my brand, and we'll come up together. But yeah, Peter, you can go. I didn't want to cut off your next question.
No, it's a perfect segue, Virgil. And so Olivia, it's a little bit more granular now in terms of my questions, but I think they're relevant to the students on the Zoom, who are many of them designers, many of them entrepreneurs, many of them hoping to launch their own businesses and brands. How does one go about pitching a magazine or pitching Vogue specifically? Do you have to have someone who represents you to make the pitch, or can you do it directly, and how?
I think I personally think that unless you've got sorry, it's my cat. Unless you've got a PR who you really trust, who's like who gets you, who gets your vision, who gets your brand. I think, I don't know, I don't know how relevant the role of a PR agency necessarily is for all young designers, like a traditional way of looking at PR. I think it's one of the things where I really think, like, look to people. If you meet with people, look for people you trust and get a vibe from. And if not, like, get your people involved, because I think as to what Virgil just said, you know, getting your brand narrative right is really important when you're talking to anyone in the fashion industry, because that's what makes you sell. You know, that's what sells you to someone. I think particularly, you know, in the times that we're in, where I see, you know, you're always going to see a garment, you're always going to see a piece of clothes, and it's going to resonate with you instinctively, aesthetically. But I think more and more this industry is engaged with the narratives around storytelling and design, and is more open to the narratives around storytelling and design. And so with regard to communicating that, you know, I hate when I get an email. I read all my DMs. I try and read as many of my emails as I can. But I hate when I get an email and it's just like a lookbook, right? Because I'm like, where's the context for this? I want to know like top line what is interesting about your brand that I'm not just going to get from your pictures. And I think pictures can tell part of that story. I think that good young designers, like the ones who I think of as engaging, reflect their brand narrative throughout as much of that output as they can, whether that's shoots that you're doing on your phone and posting on Instagram, or whether that's like a zhuzhy thing that you're doing with your friends. But I think that the storytelling element is really key. And so either you have to have a PR who's emailing that out on your behalf, who really gets that and isn't just like sending a bunch of emails because you're giving them X amount of money, and they'll be like, yeah, I emailed these people and like none of them responded. You have to get somebody who gets your messaging and how to sell that, or you sell it yourself. And I think that that's a perfectly viable way of doing things. But it's about considering the whole messaging, the whole package of the brand and what you're doing.
So it can be an email or a DM, but it should be, and it should maybe include some visual assets, but not like, there has to be the context and the story and the, you know, the articulation of what you're looking at, right?
Yeah, and I think that visuals play like a pivotal part in that, right? I think the thing that I always say to young designers first and foremost is, and I know this is one of your later questions, Peter, but social media is literally the greatest PR in the world for you. And
underline that, you know.
Like, you know, that's where it's like your shop window. It's where you can communicate every facet of your brand and storytelling. And I think that the visuals are, of course, the most immediately engaging thing about that. So look at storytelling through your visuals. Look at your Instagram as a way of communicating your brand. That's how everyone finds designers or brands or businesses or whatever. Like, that's how it works. And so I do think, making sure that side of things is on log is important.
And Olivia, so you probably do receive lots of emails and pitches. What stands out for you? How does a new designer make themselves, for you, special, distinctive, compelling?
So if someone emails me, and if a PR emails me or whatever, the first thing I do is I click on the Instagram and I scroll through, and I look, firstly, of course, I'm like, if I don't like what it looks like, I'm like, yeah, not for me. If I like what it looks like and think it's interesting, I look for what the story is, like for what vibe I get from a brand. And like I said, you know, I'm interested in how, you know, for young designers, young brands, what's different about them? Why do they exist? Why why are they in this world? Like, why has somebody given their life to this rather than going and working for somebody else? Why has somebody started their own business? What about it is a point of differentiation? So yeah, I look on the Instagram and I'm like, oh, do I get a vibe from this? Like, what are the visuals like? And I'm not saying like they need to be super polished visuals. I remember Peter Doe, for example, the American brand, who I guess he's won like a ton of awards now. He's doing really well. Like he's building up a successful business. I remember when he launched his brand, when he just launched his brand, they had this Instagram that was so good. And it wasn't glossy. It was all shot on his phone. It was like him and his friends that like shot like accessories on their phones. And it just looked chic. It looked chic and it looked weird. And I was like, oh, this is a vibe. And I followed it. And then like 6 years later, you know, the brand's still chic and kind of weird and it's a vibe. But you could sense even at that time when he had no money, no team around him creating assets or anything, that every image he was putting out into the world, every bit of information he was putting out into the world was to serve this like greater narrative that he thought his brand reflected.
Yeah,
that's another key thing is like, because I'm thinking about when you guys are developing your brand and you're like trying to get exposure or having exist, it is what we think it is. You know, it's like everyone has a brand. Everyone has an Instagram.
Yeah.
And just go for what sets yours apart. So when someone is looking at it, they're sort of like, oh, I've never seen this. And I think it's always important to sort of share it with people, take hard criticism, think about what your actual premise is, think about your photos, think about, that's your open resume always. Someone is looking at it trying to discover you. So you have to like meet them halfway. Such like nutshell, you know, like this is the real fact of the matter of getting discovered.
Yeah. And make it easy for people, right? Like make it easy. You've got it all like in what, don't send people WeTransfers. Nobody's downloading a WeTransfer. Nobody is reading 8 pages of your brand's manifesto. Like make it easy for people to ascertain what your point of difference is.
Got it. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask it only because I don't want our students to be discouraged. Do you have to know someone at a magazine, know an editor, have a friend who knows an editor? Do you have to be an advertiser, or is there some, you know, transactional aspect that gets you further along sooner? Or is it you can, just on the merits of what I'm, you know, sharing with you as a designer aesthetically, get where you want to go?
I mean, I think that the fashion industry is complicated in all sorts of ways, right? I think the reality is if you know somebody, then they're going to look at what you're doing, right? They're going to look at it like more like, you know, if a friend of mine or like, you know, Virgil sends me a designer he thinks is cool, I'm definitely looking at that. So to say that that isn't the case ever is just like not true. I wouldn't feature a brand. I wouldn't write about a brand just because I knew them or because Virgil had sent them to me or a friend of mine had sent them to me. But yeah, it does open a door. I think that when it comes to advertisers and money in the bank, yeah, brands are always gonna feature their advertisers. Like that's just, you know, that's just how the publishing industry works. It is kind of transactional to a certain degree, but there is always room, I believe, and that is in Vogue, for young designers and for new talent. And I wouldn't be doing my job as a journalist if I didn't, or an editor or whatever, if I didn't seek that out. And I know that from the board, so the way that a fashion magazine works, right, is like every stylist or editor for every fashion shoot will send through their boards like PDFs of the things they want to shoot and the references and like the product they want to shoot and the brands that they want to shoot, advertisers or not. Like you've always got to shoot some advertisers, but there's always room for other people as well. And fashion editors want to know what's new, right? I think one of the things that is really important to remember is youth is on your side. Like, all anyone wants to know is like, what do young people think is cool? What are young people engaged with? Like,
Exactly.
what's like Gen Z interested in? Like, you know, you've got like 60-year-olds talking about like what's on TikTok, and you're like, you know, people want to know what's young and cool. They want to be ahead of the curve. They want their work.
Yeah, and this is like another thing, like, and this is like good criticism of like overall like ecosystem. There's all, everyone wants to know, but then there's also the most predictable answers.
Yeah.
Right. So like everyone will pitch, and this is not diluting. I'm just saying that the landscape, because a lot of people want to know how to stand out. How do I get traction? So if it's like, I want to be sustainable, or I want to sort of represent, you know, diversity, or if I want to, like, these are all, that's all ecosystem, you know, like Olivia mentioned, like feminism in the, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, like there's always an atmosphere that everyone is tapped into. The thing to get recognized for is to take that and then like 7.0 it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not going to be enough, because the person who's pitching before you and after you is saying they want to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Or they're saying that the inclusivity, you know, it challenges you to sort of get to an innovative articulation of that idea. So if you send it to Olivia and it has to be in like the first 3 words, like the other part of the email or of the DM or on your Instagram at all times, waiting for someone to recognize you, it's got to be your other. It can't simply just be that this is that, you know.
I completely agree with you. I pretty much assume that any brand who's getting into any new brand has some sort of sustainability built into their infrastructure, right? Like, that's not like, there are certain perspectives that 5 years ago would have been like radical that just aren't. So, like Virgil said, it's about the bits that sort of stand out and make you stand out, and that's what editors or stylists are looking for, and are looking to put on their boards, are looking to shoot, are looking to write stories about, is the absolute newness.
And for this newness, Olivia, you and Virgil are both on the receiving end of a lot of appeals and pitches. Like, are there things you both do to look for new talent, separate and distinct from being on the receiving end of outreach? Are there places you go, or how do you find it?
How do you find it, Virgil? You go first.
No, well, you know, like I came from outside the fringe, so I'm always looking for someone who came from my exact outside the fringe, because I can feel the struggle. And if, you know, I look at how I follow 1 million people, because I feel like it's my right, like for me to have the voice, I can't be like the person with 0 followers. Like, I follow no one. I'm a one-way street or something. Like, it's all community, and really friends of friends. I'm super conversational. Like, the best way to build, like, cold call me through a friend that you've built some sort of, you've done a project with, or you've shown your ambition. I'll meet you halfway. But that's just how I'm tuned. And, you know, I'm more about building community than looking for one shot. Like, I have this, like, a lot of people look at someone like me and be like, I need to play the lottery, I need to get discovered, and I need to work for you at Louis Vuitton. And, you know, I want to fix the world. Like, don't we all? And it's not so much like a lottery ticket that I want people to feel like. And so community, like, you know, I met Olivia basically like going out, you know, being social, being able to have a conversation, being able to hang out. And then that builds bridges. So and it's not just work singularly, it works in all aspects of your life. But what would you say, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely echo that and basically say the same thing. It's about finding your people and building something with them, and building building something as a collective, or like working with like-minded people and being human about it. I think, you know, there are like there's like the devil wears Prada vibe of this industry somewhere, and I don't know if that's going anywhere or if it's not, or God knows. But you know, like Virgil said, it's an industry made up of normal people who have been at the starting points in their careers at some point. And I look at Edward, right, and I look at the people he works with now, and like, you know, it's the best of the best of the best. It's Steve McQueen, it's Pat McGrath, it's Naomi, it's these people. But you know, however many years ago, they were all 17-year-old kids sitting, sharing one coffee on Goldbourne Road and like working together with no money. You know, I think it's this idea that like, you know, you're going to send one DM or you're going to get one into the fashion industry and like you're golden is, I think for a start, that's not the reality. But I also think that takes like the joy out of it. Like the joy is building something with your peers collectively and all rising together. And I think the path is the fun bit, right? And having like-minded people around you who you're operating with creatively is the most exciting bit. And yeah, like most of the people who I know and work with, I met through going out. I met through people who I get on with. I don't make good work with people I don't like. Like that's not where I as a person do my best stuff. So it's just good vibes.
Nice.
Yeah. Just we'll go to your next one, but I also want to let you guys ask some sort of intermediate questions.
Yeah, I think Virgil's perfect time now because I've asked a few, and I know that the students have questions, and I think Desiree, you raised your hand, so maybe we want to open it up now, Virgil, to questions for you and Olivia.
Yeah, Desiree can go first.
I just I guess I had a question on like the idea of like legitimacy and like if that is like kind of a myth, like when you were talking about how like it doesn't always work that way, where you have like this Instagram page and like you follow nobody and like there's all of these followers, and it's like I guess how important is like that idea of like creating legitimacy in terms of like I guess like the ratio of like who is following you versus you, who are you following, or like in terms of like how people view you like as like a young designer.
I'll tell you, like, and that's a good point because, you know, followers, and now it's like uncool to have like a ton of followers just because I read Instagram like a tarot card, something like that. What's always cool to me, I know there's something great if it's like low key, right? Very cryptic. That means you kind of like, you can see speaking in a coded language or your own language is good. Like you don't have to have a ton of followers, but do something interesting that makes someone repost it. You know, I would go like a good reference for you guys is like Maulola, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
Like she is alternative, right? And it's cool because it's not everything, you know, it's almost antithesis.
Yeah.
The images are super creative. They're not speaking to other fashion images. She probably didn't have a million followers. It's one of those things where she was on so many other people's radar that it's, instead of being singular, it's kind of like just be yourself. I know everyone says that, but like just do alternative things. Act like you're talking to no one, basically. Yeah. And then people like always turn into it, you know, but of course it's easier said than done, but she was in community, right? Building.
Yeah, she's absolutely like, her work is a reflection of the world she has built with her peers. It's not a reflection of who's the cool fashion photographer and like right now, who's shooting for Dazed right now or whatever, and how do I get them to shoot my brand? It's like people who she meets and thinks are interesting, and then she works with them to build something which tells her story and their story and the story of the world that they inhabit together. And that's new and it's more resonant, absolutely, and it's more authentic. And I think that authenticity, like Virgil says, you know, it's easier said than done, but that is what engages people. It's what, like, in a time when we're saturated with stuff, it's authenticity that engages people. Like, it's not like, oh, they're cool because they follow 8 people and 8 million people follow them. You know, it's, I don't think on a very practical level you need to worry so much about that. You follow who you follow, whose feed you want to see. And
also, just the last tidbit, when I said build your community, like find a model, a muse, shoot them a bunch, let them also use this as an opportunity, because our friends in London, you know, like they have a crew of people, they work the same photographer, they work, and they all end up coming up together because it's not singular. So don't feel like you're alone, like build with some friends, like couple, like it could be the strange kid that like no one sees their style yet, or the local musician or whatever. That's the 2021 method to get discovered.
yeah, and I think it's been always the same method in fashion. I think that we just haven't seen it because it's been behind a very opaque screen, right? I think that, you know, it's what it was with Westwood in the 70s. It's what it was with Edward and his crew in the 90s. It's I think everyone is absolutely exhausted of the like glossy veneer that the internet has offered for so long, and it's looking for authentic reflections of people's worlds and communities.
Thank you.
Adele?
Hi, I'm Adele. Hi, I kind of just have a question. Like, I'm making stuff, but I'm not selling anything yet. I'm wondering like how my brand or like how people see that and get engaged could be different. Like once I start selling things, like how much of a difference does that actually make? Like whether does it not make?
Like the reality is half of the stuff that we see like Fashion Week and half is generous doesn't get sold either. Like, just,
Yeah.
You know,
myth number one.
Yeah, like everyone's just selling handbags.
Yeah.
I build your brand, build your brand, build your vision. You know, people can't buy into it. And I mean, specifically for Vogue, if we're putting something in print in Vogue, my rule is it has to be available to be bought, not necessarily by a retailer. That can be an independent e-commerce site. But I think that for our readers, it's only fair to show them things that they can buy into. But I think when building your brand, it doesn't matter, or it certainly doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
just
that's I don't know if they teach that in fashion school or not, but there is like this there's like a huge reality that fashion, like it's all image pieces, you know. It's like it's what you do runway shows, you do that, like you do those things to show who your brand is, what the DNA is. Then 9 times out of 10 a buyer is going for things that a customer easily recognizes and then they can sell, right? So, you know, like logo isn't like a Gucci. You're gonna more find a shirt that says Gucci or than you would find any look on a runway that you saw in the store. You know, that's why she says handbags, you know, like it's all what we purchase, right? And it's not to demean, it's just a bit of a reality check. Is like they, more often than not, people can't afford, or they're not into a dress, you know, because you're not going to buy a dress every day, but they'll buy something that relates to the brand name that they can wear with every outfit. They can wear it 6 times a week instead of 1. So as you're building your brand, having that in your back of your mind, being like a logo tee, you know, that's part of the reason why I got on. Is I unabashedly streetwear was like, hey, we do t-shirts. Yeah. Like it's not so much of like a thing you have to hide in the back door. while you project this image of being high fashion. But, 9 times out of 10, if your brand isn't successful at monetizing, it's because there's probably not easier pieces for people to buy into. And you'll hear a lot about this called like a marketing department. To a designer, that you kind of go like this every time you hear, and it's not marketing as it relates to like marketing a brand. I still don't know why those words are used together. Completely not. Like marketing, I thought was like advertising. So you would work in like the communications department, but in my brands, Off-White and LV, there's a marketing department that looks at my creativity and is like, no, like we're not, like what Olivia says, we're not going to sell any of those. We're going to sell, I need a shirt that's, not oversized, that's falls at a price point of like 200 euros that has the logo on it. So you're always battling that with also like trying to do runway shows and trying to do beautiful things. And, Olivia's not telling you about the hard part. She is
well,
like,
okay, so that's this one really good thing. Okay,
you are a fashion, like whether she admits it or not, like she's in like the fashion, like they review shows, like she's the crew that's like, this show is good or not. And what I love about that, it's not about, if they don't care if it sells or not, they're pulling the best out of you.
And I think that that like dispelling, I think that the fashion show is super interesting for that reason, because it's the ultimate bit of brand building and reflection of a vision, right? And I think one of the things I love most about every fashion week is, so I'm a big Comme des Garçons fan, right? Like I love Comme above all else. And you go to those shows and, as of, 6-7 years ago now, Ray stopped putting like clothes on the runway. She started putting these sort of sculptures, these big like conceptual pieces, and you'd get like 12 looks, and they make maybe 2 or 3 of them, of these like fabulous looks that they sell every season. But what you can do the next day is you go into the Comme showroom, and they have all of the commercial iterations of that collection. So say you've seen like a big bubble thing that's got like no arms, and only the best people in the world are actually buying that. You see how that develops into commercial product in the showroom, and how the codes and the ideas and the vision that has been expressed on the runway is distilled into, like Virgil said, the t-shirt that someone's going to wear far more easily than they wear the thing with no arms, but has some of that same energy imbued in it somehow, whether that's through a fabric, whether that's through a cut, whether that's through a logo, whether that's through whatever. So while you can build this exciting dynamic vision for your brand that isn't ever going to make you a great deal of money, what you can do is look at brands who distill those things successfully into key pieces that are the commercial foundations for the brand. And I think it's a really sad thing when the two aren't seen in harmony, right? Because the more commercial foundation you build for your brand, the more you can afford to be creative. It doesn't have to be like it's not like the idea of selling out by making an entry point t-shirt. It's, if you sell enough of those entry point t-shirts, you can afford to build your brand more in whatever way you choose to. The two parts work in harmony together. It's not one or the other. And I think that that's where a lot of young creators and a lot of young designers fall down, is the idea that if you're like making money, or if you want to make money, that's not a creative thing. And I just don't think that's true. I think that sets the foundation for creativity.
Any
Absolutely,
connect questions?
Yeah, Elizabeth?
Yeah, hi. I actually wanted to ask the question from like the writer's perspective, because I do also have a major in English literature, and I concentrate in writing. So I wanted to know what you think makes an article effective, or what you consider to be like the essential components of a successful article.
I think someone's opinion. I think I think someone's opinion and perspective, having a perspective. I think like it's the same as design in the sense it's what you bring to the table that is different to what other people do. And I think that the reason why I had success when I started was because I was writing about feminism in fashion like before that became a thing that people put on t-shirts, right? Like before it was part of the fashion vernacular. So it was like my thing was like, I have a perspective about fashion and feminism. And that makes me sort of stand out in some way. Like I understand that, I have an expertise in that, that's my niche. And that's what I'm passionate about. And that reverberates through the writing. I think it's having a perspective and an opinion and believing in that. And like I said earlier, I think, your generation is a generation who people are desperate to hear from. Like everyone wants to like be inside your head, like lean into that, lean into the fact that a 45-year-old fashion journalist doesn't know what's going on TikTok. They literally don't know how to navigate TikTok. Yeah. So the things that you see emerge as part of like your friends, your peers, your way of navigating this world is what makes you unique. You don't need to write, you don't need to imitate other generations of writers because like Susie Menkes is great or Tim Blanks is great or Sarah or Robin or whoever. You need to lean into what you know and what makes you unique. And I think that the more you do that, the more you like, the better it'll be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, so many good points.
Ariane?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ariane. So I had a question. You guys were talking about, like building our brands and just being like young creators. And like the question was asked about authenticity. So is there like a such thing of like posting too much about your brand, like as we're like starting our brands and building our brands? Like, is there a such thing as posting too much content or, just posting too much to where consumers or future customers will, like get tired of seeing us post, about whatever it is concerning our brand?
I would say there isn't, because it's free, like it's with each you get better at whatever you do multiple times, as long as you don't stop and you keep evolving, that's helping you craft your voice, like Olivia said it in her pitch. She basically was like, I was just writing emails like until something happened, and then look, something happened. So ignore that side of your brain. But what I would challenge you to do is think about engagement. Like you get less satisfaction from just like hitting the button, but like how can your content be engaging? It's like interview friends, do something that uplifts somebody else. Will undoubtedly have two, just by math, you'll have two people posting about one thing than itself. So it's kind of like working smarter and working in that way.
Anything you want to add, Olivia, to that?
No, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else, guys, with a question for Virgil or Olivia? Do not be shy. Virgil, you're sometimes better at eliciting questions than I am. So maybe
yeah. Now I'm gonna ask like okay. Since we have Olivia, we'll keep it focused to like Vogue, right? Do you guys? What I'd like to ask in a sort of like everyone can sort of like rapid fire way, if you have one image to post or to send to a Vogue editor, what would you send?
What like from a collection or something?
Yeah, I just wonder because I know that not like if no one's talkative right now, but I know
Yeah.
they each have like their project and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Oh no, please show me. Yeah. Great.
Or like I don't know if you have it on like around you or
Yeah.
like you just show it on your phone, being like, oh, this is my brand. Like just you have some like FaceTime with
Yeah, do it. I would love that.
so she can get a gist of like what the what's going on in your world, and don't look at like, oh, it has to be the best thing. It's kind of like this is some good rapid fire feedback or things to look at that
Yeah, and I think bear in mind that like it's editors' jobs, right? It's our like a good editor. It's our jobs to be like finding stuff and looking for new stuff. It's not just like a battle of trying to get things in front of people. It's our jobs to be looking for things as well. And I think remember that when you're showing things to people in this industry, we're coming at them because we want to see newness as well. We want to see new ideas. We want to be inspired by new things. It's not like we just want to like look at things and be shady about them.
Can I show my senior project?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Okay. So I'm basically a senior right now. I'm going to be graduating next week, Friday. And basically I created a modest collection, and it really was kind of inspired by my journey of kind of like self-love and accepting who I was and just kind of living, my truth as a Muslim woman. So this bra, well, it was actually a purse that I created out of a bra, and it was called Zero Function. And I created it because that's how I was living in life, not really functioning, but kind of like trying to function while not functioning mentally. So this was one of my accessories I created. And then this was one of the looks that I made, and it was basically modest fashion. And I used Isco denim, but I created all of the prints on the denim through bleaching and kind of stripping the fabric. And then I also used like vinyl fusing for like this part here. So it's like plastic on top of denim. And I created like the headbands and everything, but it was basically inspired by modest fashion and kind of like accepting who you are, even though you might have a past. Every woman has a very bright future. So I really wanted to kind of work with that for like my collection. And this was my second look as well.
Where did the bras come into it?
Well, I wanted to create a bra. I wanted to create a purse that was not functional. So I decided a bra would be great because you can't put anything inside of the purse or anything. So it was called Zero Function because
I love that. I love the bra purse thing. I think that's super interesting in as well if you're exploring modest fashion and women's identities. I think that's great. I don't think I've seen that before.
Yeah, because me and my mom, we actually came up with the idea. I mean, the collection was inspired by my mom kind of accepting who I was, even though I wasn't living the best life, she was there for me. So we had actually discussed the bra purse, and it finally came into fruition like 3 years later. And I was like, this would be great to kind of represent the fact that, I was living a fast life, but I wasn't able to function in society because like mentally I was kind of like all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to create a bra that created a purse that was not functional. So that's where the whole thing came in for the bra.
You should look at building some function into it as well, because like that bottom, like that shot where it's on the bottom left, I think that's great. I think that looks beautiful and interesting as well. And it's got an interesting story behind it. So if you can look at a way of building that into something that could have some element of functionality, I think it could still retain that same messaging.
Yeah.
But be something that could be like purposeful in the world as well.
Yeah, because I mean, the idea was to kind of have it closed like up here, but it was a bra. So it's like you can't push it together or anything. But to like one day when I have enough money, I'll definitely try to get a production team or something to kind of make it into a shape that close at the top, but still retain its like curvy shape here and everything.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. But this was my third look. And I even had a film, if you guys want to see, it's like 40 seconds.
Why don't you send it to me on Instagram?
Yeah, what's your Instagram?
Olivia J. Singer.
Thank you, Olivia.
J. Singer, okay.
That would be great, Miriam. And anybody else want to respond to Virgil's request just to show something, an image, a background,
I can share
environment?
my screen for like my senior collection.
Sure.
So this is kind of my Instagram right now. So I have a lot of content coming up on here. I collaborated with a lot of models on campus, like friends, and a photographer. So the name of my collection is Battle Cry, and I have a similar take. This is kind of my about. It's inspired by Amazonian silhouettes, and it's kind of an ode to women and the battles that they go through. So I wanted it to be soft and strong, and have a lot of shapes and textures that really juxtapose each other. So it's also sustainable. So I can start going through some of the pictures. Like all of the woven elements were all thrifted and upcycled from different garments. And I even used like fabric from a curtain to make all the linings. So
Amazing.
I have some stuff here. That's
I
kind
love
of the
those
first
ruched.
one.
I love those like ruched cycling short things.
Yeah, the bike shorts are
Yeah.
fun. I took a lot of group shots. Definitely love the photographer who I got to work with.
That's great. And were they like, yeah, people from your campus, people around? I love this ruching.
Yeah.
It's great. And that's so good
Yeah.
for women's bodies, right?
Yeah, it's like a junior on my campus. So have like a lot of stuff here, but definitely the ruching, like the power mesh was the only element that I couldn't get to be sustainable, but everything else is upcycled.
It's hot. It's hard unless you're working at super scale for mesh.
Yeah. I'm just gonna like keep clicking through.
It looks great. Congratulations. Oh, I'll have a proper forward it to me on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I followed you earlier, so I can just send it to you.
Thanks.
Oh, this is great as well with the harness.
Everything's kind of like a little bit corset inspired. Definitely these pants were like the hardest part, but yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. Anybody else? I know we got not any time really left, but
I can share.
Okay, great.
This is Jordan.
Thanks.
One of my friends, who's like one of my really good friends, we actually like work together because she's trying to be a she's aspiring to be a stylist. So she's kind of my muse in my head, even though she knows this, but she's like my personal muse. And I just really admire her style, like overall, like that's kind of how we became friends. I haven't released the photos yet on my brand page. But as everyone who knows me in here, my brand is called A Loved One. And the overall premise is just self-love, loving yourself, standing out in the crowd. So my friend, she did a photo shoot with one of my logo t-shirts that I have on now. But she did a shoot with it and she styled it. And I think she captured the overall essence of my brand very well. So I'm just going to share a few photos with you guys.
I love that you're wearing it now as well. Like I
Thank
think
you.
like Moa Lola, right? Returning to what Virgil said earlier, like be your own brand ambassador.
Thank you.
Embody your brand somehow.
Yeah.
So here's one of the images here. This is my friend Tanisha.
Oh, great.
And she actually thrifted the blazer herself. But like I said, I feel like she captured the overall vibe of my brand, you know, and just even the setting of where the photos are. It's in this like decrepit, abandoned area. And she's in Ohio, I'm in Pittsburgh. But, you know, just overall standing out, you can't help but look at her in these images alone, you know, from the logo shirt and the jacket and just how she even styled it. I'm really big on I'll say thank you on her behalf, but thank you. I'm really big on pushing positive imagery of Black women and just like our aesthetic. So I'm just like even happy with how she styled her hair. You know, it was very true to who she is and who I see myself as a Black woman. I'm going to share another one with you guys. This is my favorite right here. I'm about to pull up this one here. But yeah, I just wanted to share these.
Thank you so much. She looks great.
Thank you. They'll be on my Instagram, a loved
Awesome.
one, a dot loved dot one, number one
Awesome.
soon. So that's it.
Great.
And I love that. And I love as well, you know, getting friends of yours to wear clothes, to interpret them in their own way. Like Virgil said, you know, it gets more visibility, literally, than you've got two people. Like it's just on a practical level.
Thank you.
So good.
Thank you.
That's the vibe, is like showing the work. So Peter, how much time do we have?
I think we have T minus 6 minutes. I think we were meant to stop at 1, and I know Olivia's in London, and it's not 1 p.m. in London. We had a few Virgil of the scholars who weren't able to attend because, you know, they're in school or they have jobs, so we're going to send the recording to them. But I think that probably wraps it up. And Olivia, if you don't mind, I'd encourage anyone who was reluctant to share with you, you know, through Instagram would be great.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Amazing.
Cool. Thank you, Olivia, for joining. I'm glad that you guys
having me.
were all to sort of like link and build, and another awesome session on the postmodernism logic.
Thank you, Virgil. Thanks, Olivia, very, very much. And thanks to all of you who tuned in, from the 45-year-old TikToker who doesn't know.
I mean, look, I still can't get my head around it, Peter.
Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.